listeners! I'm your host, Sarah.
And I'm Lauren.
And today we are presenting a morbid tale for you all. In each episode, our team has researched a case for us to present. The cases all involve relationships or marriages that end in murder. They also include another layer of intrigue. Our audience will have to decide whether the tale we are telling is fact or fiction. The answer will be revealed at the end of each episode, so make sure to stick around to find out if you're correct or not.
And so far, this one has been my favorite. A lot of time periods are romanticized. One of the most common years to look back to and think of as iconic, trouble-free, is the period of the 1950s in America. However, on July 7th, 1953, there was definitely trouble in paradise for Patrick and Mary Maloney. Mary was 6 months pregnant, glowing through her pregnancy with the couple's first child, despite how long it seemed like they'd been together. It was common for friends to say that they'd been married 50 years, when in fact it had been 2. The couple had settled in as the grandparents of the group, even bickering like an old couple. The two had a routine. It was Thursday, and on Thursdays, the Maloneys always either went out or ordered in as a treat. That's why Mary Maloney was waiting in her comfy chair for her husband. At 10 minutes to 5, he walked in, and she greeted him with the usual fashion, took his coat, and began to make drinks for the two like she always did. Patrick was a detective, so his drinks were always much stronger than the ones she made for herself.
Tonight, something was off, though. Patrick typically stuck to 1 drink before dinner, but almost immediately he was up pouring himself another one, this one even stronger than the last. Mary tried to get him that drink as well, and even tried to start dinner, because it seemed like tonight wasn't going to be a going out night. However, Patrick kept telling her to sit down, one time even getting quite stern with her. Mary started to feel slightly uneasy with Patrick's behavior. He was quickly getting drunk and angry, a combination that was uncommon for him. He kept stirring his cup in his hand, and all she could hear was the tinkling of his ice cubes against the glass, like a metronome to her anxiety.
Patrick finally sighed and told her what he had been holding back. He had cheated on Mary, with a woman he'd met on a case. Mary couldn't dare to believe the news. Here she was, pregnant with his baby, and he had just told her he'd cheated. Instead of acknowledging the news, she offered once again to get supper. This time, when she got up, Patrick didn't tell her to sit back down. He just kept stirring the glass with the sound of the ice cubes, following her as she walked down the stairs to the cellar. Mary then described the feeling in the moment as numb, a sense of derealization rushing over her. Her feet didn't seem to touch the floor, and she felt slightly nauseous.
Mary headed to the deep freezer in the cellar. Patrick didn't want to go out, and that meant they had no meat thawed. When she reached it, she pulled out whatever her hand grabbed first, a frozen leg of lamb. She heads back toward the kitchen with the meat when Patrick told her not to make supper, that he was going to go out instead. This broke something in Mary, and she took 1 swing with the leg of the lamb, frozen solid from its time in the freezer, and clubbed Patrick over the head with it. He seemed to waver for a moment, about 4 or 5 seconds, in shock before his body crashed into the ground, overturning the small coffee table in their living room.
The clatter brought Mary out of her trance, and she reports that she was overcome with shock at what she had just done. However, once it cleared, her mind was remarkably logical. As the wife of a detective, she knew what her punishment would be. If it weren't for her pregnancy, she would have called the cops herself. However, out of fear and a sense of motherly responsibility for her baby, she developed another plan. Mary carried the leg of lamb into the kitchen and placed it in the oven. Then she headed upstairs, fixed her hair, and did some minimal makeup. In the mirror, she rehearsed what she would say to the shopkeep at the grocery store. She then practiced multiple times before grabbing her purse and leaving through the door to the back garden and out onto the street. She checked her watch. It was still before 6. When she reached the store, a nondescript neighborhood grocery store, Century Grocery, she asked Sam Gardner, the shopkeep, for some potatoes and a can of peas. As Sam gathered the veggies, she told him that Patrick had caught her without any vegetables in the house, since they usually go out on Thursdays. She also asked for Sam's opinion on cooking meat straight from the freezer. The man had said he always cooks meat frozen. Sam also suggested that Mary get a cheesecake for dessert, and Mary ended up taking him up on the offer.
As she walked back to her home, groceries in hand, she rehearsed her story. She's a wife returning to her loving, tired husband, and she has to cook dinner perfectly because that will make him feel better from his lethargy. If when she enters there's any kind of tragedy, she would naturally be struck with grief and horror. But she shouldn't be expecting to find anything. When she opened the door, she completes their tradition of calling out for one another. And when she spotted his body, she screamed and cried, dropping her grocery bags on the floor. The can of peas rolls across toward his body. Mary reported that it wasn't hard to fake her reactions. She still loved her husband, and that doesn't go away instantly.
She called the police station and told them that she had found Patrick dead. 2 police officers quickly came, and she knew both of them, Noonan and O'Malley. Officer Noonan held Mary as she cried, and then placed her in a chair after a few minutes to help his fellow officer on the scene. Once the officers concluded that Patrick had died from foul play, they called in everybody, detectives, crime scene photographers, the chief, everyone. Patrick was well liked within the station. Mary gave her statement to the officers, tells them how she had ran to the grocery store to make sure that dinner was perfect. The police took Sam's statement as well, and the man said that Mary was acting perfectly all right, quoted normal and cheerful. By the time they'd interviewed Sam, most of the police crowd had cleared away, only a few officers still remaining. They told Mary that Patrick was killed by a blow to the back of the head, almost certainly a large metal object. However, after searching, they couldn't find a weapon matching that description inside the house. The police concluded to Mary that the killer must have thrown it away as he was fleeing from the scene, or hidden it nearby, since it would have been impossible to carry such a heavy piece of metal around for so long without raising suspicion.
As they're doing another search of the house for a possible murder weapon, Officer Noonan reminds Mary that she still has meat cooking in the oven, which she claims to have forgotten about. When she's reminded, she insists the officers eat it. She wasn't hungry, and probably wouldn't be for a while. The officers had helped her here way past supper time, and Patrick would hate it if she wasn't as hospitable as possible to the 4 officers. After a few minutes of back and forth bickering, Mary finally talked them into eating the leg of lamb, and as she got the officers settled into their plates, she listened to them from the next room over, sitting in the living room. The men talked loudly about how the murder weapon must be either painfully obvious because the perpetrator would have had to have been basically lugging around a large club, or right under their noses, and they just couldn't find it.
So, now you've heard our tale. Have you decided yet? Is it real, or is it fake?
It is fake. This murder mystery belongs to Roald Dahl's short story of the same name, Lamb to the Slaughter. This method of murder, however, seems purely ingenious, if not a little impractical for a woman who's very, very pregnant.
But I still enjoy it.
It's a really good one.
It's so creative.
I feel like it would have never been... And they couldn't have figured it out. They just couldn't have.
It's crazy. Anyways, thank you so much for listening and guessing along with us today. We appreciate all of your support. If you'd like to get updates whenever we post, you can click the subscribe button down below and make sure to leave some comments about what you think of the case. We'd love to hear anything you have on it. Our social media will also be linked below if you'd like to learn about our views.